My name is Jack Silver. When all this started, I was 24 years old. I was approaching my 25th birthday. I lived with my girlfriend Andrea, whom everyone called Drea. I wasn't handsome. I am 5 feet 10 inches tall, weigh 175 pounds, and have brown hair and eyes. At least I had brown hair back then. Now they are already mixed with gray hair, and I haven't even turned 30. Drea, on the other hand, was every man's walking dream. She was 5 feet 2 inches tall, and perhaps the best word to describe her would be trembling. She weighed just over 100 pounds, and most of that weight was in her button breasts. Her eyes were the purest blue you've ever seen, and her lips were the reddest red. If you think of a blonde cheerleader, Drea is what comes to mind. I worked the night shift as an assistant manager at an auto parts warehouse to pass the time. I say, pass the time because after my 25th birthday, I was due between $4 and $5 million. My grandfather left me this money, but he wanted to make sure that my life would be smooth if I inherited it. His will was very specific. I should have graduated from college with a degree. Check mark. I needed to be officially employed for at least 2 years. Check mark. And I had to be single. Check mark. I dated Drea for 3 years. We met in my last year of college. She worked as a waitress in one of the bars where I went with my friends in those days. After college, she and I started dating seriously. And if it weren't for the money, we would probably be married by now. I loved Drea, and I was sure that she loved me. Many other women I dated saw my situation as something of a challenge. I think they thought that if I really loved them, I would give up the money and get married anyway. I guess they thought it would prove something. Maybe it was supposed to mean that they were more important to me than money or something like that. I think I can understand this. After all, money can't buy happiness. But realistically speaking, they make misfortune much more fun. I've always been the conservative type. I've always been that guy who tries to do everything I can, the best I can. When I do something well or complete a difficult task, it gives me a sense of achievement. Drea, on the other hand, simply accepted life as it came. Before we met, she was wild. I've heard stories of her leaving the bar with different guys every night, and sometimes several at once. Her entire family is best described as semi-quasi-legal. I think a lot of this is exaggerated. She grew up poor and in a bad neighborhood, so sometimes they had to fight to feed themselves and keep the wolf away from the door. When you grow up on the wrong side of the tracks, sometimes you have to make questionable decisions just to survive. Drea actually grew up on the rails, so she got it from both sides. If she weren't so beautiful, she most likely would have ended badly. She was a real hard worker, so I didn't pay much attention to her past when we started dating. Let's be honest, I wasn't a virgin either, so why should I expect innocence or purity from her? As I reasoned, everything she did for me, which I liked so much, she had to study somewhere. I benefited from this entire experience. Drea was just crazy. Sometimes she would meet me at the door when I came home from work. She was completely naked, on all fours with a rolled-up newspaper in her mouth, like those cartoon dogs on TV. No matter how tired I was, no matter how hellish my day at work was, she never failed to turn me on. Sex with Drea was a marathon. After 6 months of marriage, I realized that we still hadn't turned on the TV. All we ever did was sleep, eat, or make love. Now I know a lot of you out there think I'm a fool. Leopards don't change their spots, do they? Well, in defense of 2 things, Drea had a sister who was just as beautiful as she was. Her sister, Molly, married at 20, and has 2 wonderful children and a husband who loves her. Molly was as wild as Drea before she was reined in. I thought, well, hoped that Drea would be the same. But at the same time, I really wasn't stupid. I would ask friends to sometimes walk by the bar to check on her. I even asked several guys that I was sure she didn't know to try to get to know her, and she never took the bait. She told every damn one of them that she had a boyfriend. So how did this happy-go-lucky romance hit the reefs? Just as it always happens. We had an accident at the warehouse. One of the high-lift drivers was trying to get a box from the top shelf. He thought he had it, but ended up dropping an entire box of F-150 tie rod ends. This in itself was not a problem. We later found out that none of the parts were damaged during the fall. The problem was where the box fell. It fell directly onto the electrical panel that contained the circuit breakers for the entire warehouse. Our electricians spent almost 2 days fixing everything, so we left work very early that night and got the next day off. So instead of working from midnight to 8 in the morning and getting home around 8:30, I arrived at our house around 1 in the morning. There were about 8 or 9 motorcycles parked on the side of the road in front of our building. Loud music was playing, and I wondered how the neighbors could tolerate it. I was even more shocked to learn that the music was coming from my floor. I was sure that when Drea finished working at the bar, she would make a fuss if the music was still playing, especially if it was near our apartment. As I walked around the corner, I noticed that the music wasn't just near our apartment. It was coming from our apartment. When I pushed my way into the apartment, all I heard was laughter. There were at least 5 or 6 guys standing in the living room, watching what was happening in the other room. They were dressed roughly, but I was too annoyed for it to matter. They were screaming and laughing, and one guy handed me a beer. "Hey, buddy, drink this," he said. "But you'll have to wait your turn. Don't worry, this bitch can take it all night, and her pathetic, poor boyfriend won't come home until the morning. By the time he gets his ass here, she'll be cleaned up and ready for him. How accessible girl. She even had sex with her brother earlier tonight." As I approached the bedroom, all I heard was a man's voice moaning and a woman's hoarse voice screaming, "Take me, baby." I pushed my way into the room and saw her there, on our bed. The same bed that we chose in 10 furniture stores because it had to perfectly combine our tastes. I turned away from the bed and headed towards my dresser. I grabbed a bunch of my clothes and opened my closet to grab my laptop. One guy grabbed my arm and tried to stop me. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted. "We won't let you steal from this bitch or take her things. Get your dirty biker hands off me or I'll call the police so quickly that you're—" I started. Even when I spoke, he pushed me. I recoiled from the push. The guy was bigger than me and outweighed me by 50 pounds. I fell on my back against the wall and the guys in the room started screaming. The guy who had sex with Drea looked over and saw me. I recognized him. It really was Drea's brother. His name was Augustine. His name was Gus. He turned pale when he recognized me. I landed next to someone's clothes. When the guy who pushed me rushed at me, I grabbed the motorcycle helmet and hit him as hard as I could on his head. I was sure something snapped when it made contact, and he fell next to me, almost falling on top of me. He lost consciousness before he even hit the ground. I was still holding the helmet in my hands. I grabbed my laptop and a bunch of clothes again as I rose to my feet. "Oh, shit!" Gus screamed. "Drea!" Drea turned to me and our eyes met. "Jack!" she screamed. "No, Jack!" I got to my feet and left the apartment. As I walked out into the hallway and started walking down it, I heard someone say, "Go get him back here. She needs to talk to him." I ran down the stairs as quickly as possible. When I went outside, I did what I always wanted to do. I knocked over the first motorcycle in the row. It wasn't as easy as I thought. I had to lift the kickstand and let him fall. This did cause the next few bikes in the row to fall, but after that, there was too much distance between them. I got in my truck and drove away. Was I shocked? Was I injured? Did I feel stupid? The answer to all of the above is yes. I was shocked. I really didn't consider myself that naive. Was I injured? Hell yeah. I really loved Drea, and I thought she felt the same way about me. Did I feel stupid? Yes, I really felt that way, because I guess I always knew it. At the end of the day, why a girl who looks like this and is so wild would actually settle down with a regular guy like me, it just doesn't make sense. I think all my hopes that she would be like her sister were in vain. I stopped by the warehouse to see how the renovations were going. The entire building was still without power. I spoke to the electrical supervisor, and he told me that it would certainly be at least another day before we could get back to work. I didn't have anywhere to go, so I drove for another hour or so. I've seen bikers several times. Usually there were 2 or 3 of them together. I wasn't afraid of them. I figured that in the worst case, I would just knock them down. My F-150 4x4 will easily pass over these bikes without too much trouble. My phone started ringing around this time. I looked at the screen and saw the apartment number on it. I left it on voicemail. Drea must have been desperate because she immediately called me back 5 or 6 times in a row. By 6 in the morning, still a couple of hours before I usually finished work, I was very hungry. I stopped at a small cafe near the warehouse. I often ate there before work or sometimes after work. Drea used to cook for me. But if our schedules didn't allow it, which happened quite often, considering that I worked from midnight to 8 in the morning and she from 6 in the evening to 2 in the morning, I ate at a cafe. I sat at a table far enough away from the window that I couldn't be seen from outside, but close enough to the door that I could still see if anyone came in. The bikers were definitely looking for me, but I didn't know why. Maybe they were just trying to get me back to Drea. On the other hand, they could have been angry because of the guy I hit in the face with my helmet, or because I knocked over all those bikes when I left. Before more than a couple of seconds had passed, the waitress stood in front of me. Looking at her, I smiled. If body language meant anything, it was her first night on the job and her legs were really sore. "Hi," she said bravely. She wasn't exactly beautiful, but she was attractive. Her hair was cut short and roughly styled. They stuck out at odd angles in some places. Her nose was a little long and her teeth seemed sharper than they should have been. Her fangs especially stood out. All in all, it was a strange face. She wasn't ugly, though. Despite all her strange features, she was really attractive. I think maybe it was the eyes that always attracted everyone here in the first place. Her eyes were an exotic grayish color that always seemed to draw all the attention away from the other features of her face and towards her. She was thinner. Her arms and legs were thin, but seemed strong. I think if we were talking about a guy, I would call him wiry. I've always been extremely pragmatic. I think by that point my mind had already made up its mind about my relationship with Drea. For me, Drea became history. We didn't need to talk about things. She didn't need to apologize, ask for a second chance, explain, or anything like that. It was my fault. It was me who screwed up, not her. Most men wanted their women to be ladylike in public and passionate in the bedroom. I was no different. The problem was that I went even further. I only wanted Drea to be passionate in the bedroom when I was there alone. There was no chance to save our relationship. She went from being a bride to being some girl I knew at the time. She was screaming, "Take me, baby." I planned to remove my name from the apartment lease and find a new place to live the next day. Luckily, Drea and I still had separate accounts when it came to banking. I have often given her money or written checks for her, but have not yet given her access to my accounts. One way or another, at that moment, I imagined myself between these thin legs. I felt those arms wrap around me and pull me deeper into her depths. There was something almost primal in this fantasy. It was as if I was imagining something that either had already happened or something that was sure to happen sometime in the future. Then, the strangest thing was, she looked at me, smiled shyly, and moved her legs together. Somehow it looked like she was having the same unpleasant vision at the same time as me. She had slender hips and small breasts, but at that moment she was the sexiest thing I had ever seen. It wasn't like me at all. I've never been one to chase casual encounters or casual sex. Perhaps it was a reaction to having my heart ripped out. Perhaps it was some kind of subconscious reaction of the male ego. My woman was taken by other men to prove that I was still a masculine specimen. My body wanted to mate with the nearest female to ensure that I was still fertile. I guess from a freshman's perspective, it might have made sense. But I felt like there was more to it than that. "May I take your order, sir?" she asked. She asked this question while I was still imagining myself having sex with her. She caught me off guard, so I wasn't entirely aware of what I was saying. In any case, my brain was not completely connected to my mouth. So instead of what I should have said, what came out was what I was thinking. "God, what beautiful eyes," I muttered. "Is this what you want to eat?" she said in surprise. She started to write it down and looked at it and smiled again. There was definitely something between us. This was also unusual. Everything was happening too quickly. I was one of those guys who, although I was in a relationship, just wasn't the Casanova type. When I broke up with someone, it usually took months before I found someone again. Sorry, I said. I didn't want to say that. It just came out. Your friend probably wouldn't be very happy with either of us right now, she said. Sorry, I mean your wife. I don't have a wife, I said. I've never had one. I've never had a wife either, she smiled. I mean, I don't have a friend, boyfriend. I'll make a special breakfast, I said, looking down. Then I looked at her again. Are you new here? This is my first day, she said. She left to get my order, and I swear her shoulders tensed as she walked away, making her slender hips sway even more. She turned and looked at me as she walked into the kitchen, as if checking to see if I was looking at her ass. She smiled when she saw me there and disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, she brought my food to the table and sat on a stool in front of the cafe and watched me eat. Every time I took a sip or two, she would refill my coffee cup. She seemed to check on me every 5 minutes. Her smile grew wider the entire time I was there. When I finished, she rushed towards me. Would you like some more food? She asked. Do you often have lunch here? No and yes, I said. She looked puzzled and then realized what I meant. I'll probably dine here a lot more often now, I smiled. Can I have a check? She smiled and looked down. The breakfast special was at $4.99. I gave her 2 A's. She grabbed my hand in a show of amazing strength. You gave me too much money, she smiled. She was still holding my hand, as if she didn't want to let go. I rubbed the back of her hand and thought her eyes were almost rolling back in her head. She let out a loud sigh. Something was definitely happening to us. That's your advice, I said. Oh, she smiled again, and her teeth sparkled. Those eyes and 2 white teeth delighted me. I couldn't figure out what it was. Her fingers were also strange. The nails were broken and torn. It felt like she was biting her nails or working with heavy tools. I looked at her again, getting ready to leave. Her face, with a little makeup, could be very attractive. Her eyes alone could catch almost any guy. Her hair was terrible. If she let it grow a little and then styled it, she could become beautiful. And her body, although not what I was used to, was fit and toned. She also had the advantage of a slimmer physique that would look better for much longer. More voluptuous women almost always became real fat asses in middle and older age, while slimmer women seemed to remain attractive even into the twilight of their lives. The funny thing is, despite her flaws, I almost wanted to have sex with this woman. It was the strangest thing, as if it was some kind of genetic predisposition. Perhaps it was some kind of pheromones. When will you be back? She asked. I had a feeling that if I told her I wasn't coming back, she would ask to come with me. Either lunch or dinner, I said. I need to find a new place to stay for the night, so I may not be back in time for dinner. What time do you have dinner? She asked. When I get hungry, I laughed. I promise that if I miss you at dinner, I'll be here tomorrow morning for breakfast. Okay then, she said cheerfully. I returned to my truck to find the wind leaving my sails. My shift usually ended around this time in the morning. If it was a normal morning, I would already be on my way home. I'd sneak into Drea's bed. She would wake up and we would have sex and then go back to sleep. Now I found myself wondering how many times she was tired, not from working at the bar, but from working in our bed without me. I took the morning newspaper and looked through the advertisements. It was too early to call any building that had an advertisement, so I stopped at a motel for the day. I slept for about 4 hours. It was already around noon when I was woken up by a ringing sound on my iPhone. I called 3 ads and made an appointment for the afternoon. I took a shower, got in the truck, and drove to my old building. The building manager seemed happy to see me. Sorry for the trouble you had last night, he said. Your fiancé assures me that this will not happen again. That guy who fell on the steps and broke his jaw, how is he doing? I have no idea what you're talking about, I said. I came home unexpectedly, and Drea was entertaining friends. We had a fight. We broke up. She's keeping the apartment, so I'd like to have my name removed from the lease. Well, let me call her, he said. If she agrees, then there's no problem. Why would you call her? I asked. Both of your names are on the lease, he said. In order for her to be responsible for the entire term of the lease, she must agree to it. Then I'll tell you what, I said. In any case, our lease expires in a month. We have already paid for this month. I'll write you a check for half of next month's rent. This way we won't have to tell her anything. Well, I'll have to talk to her anyway, he said. You can just give me the receipt, I told him. I'll fax it to her. This way she will know that all she is responsible for is half of next month's rent. If she wants to renew her lease at the end of next month, she can do it alone. Okay, let me get the receipt pad, he said, smiling. He left the room and seemed to be gone longer than necessary to find an item he probably used often. When he returned to the room, he didn't have it. But he sat down and smiled. I handed over the check. He reached for it. Where is your receipt book? I asked. I'll have to get it, he said. I thought it was funny, but I ignored it. He seemed in no hurry to look for it, so I stood up and walked towards the door. Where are you going? He asked. Something is happening, I said. I think I'm going to visit your boss in his office and tell him what I want. Sometimes it's better to talk to the owner. Please don't do this, he shouted. She promised me $100. I rushed to the door. I opened it just in time to bump into Drea as she tried to knock on it. I pushed past her and she grabbed me. Drea, get your hands off me, I said. Jack, we need to talk about this, she said. Sorry, they got me drunk. And you know how much I love sex. You must forgive me. I love you. Oh, okay, Dra, I said. I hugged her and pulled her to me, turning us around. So you will forgive me only once? She asked. Yeah, I smiled. But just this once. I turned and walked out the door. Where are you going, darling? She asked. I think we need to go upstairs to our apartment so I can prove something to someone. I'll get up now, I said. Take off your clothes. I need to get my stuff out of the truck. She smiled, kissed me, and headed back into the hallway. So we're all right? Asked the building manager. I gave him a wicked smile and a thumbs up. I left the building whistling a cheerful tune. I got in the truck and drove across town to my first meeting at the apartment. I like this place, but it turned out that it belongs to the same management company as the other building. I set it up for this reason only. The second place I saw was beautiful. It was right on the embankment. The scenery and landscaping were stunning. It was also double my rent for the apartment I shared with Drea. The third place was a beautiful building, but there were too many children around it. Some of them were teenagers and were just hanging around looking for trouble. I have nothing against children, but I work at night. This means that I like to sleep during the day. For this, I need silence. This also means that while I am away from my place, it is vulnerable. In about a month, I'll have $4 million. Why bother with a few dollars? I signed a 3-month trial lease for the second location. I drove past the warehouse, even though I knew I wouldn't have to work that night. As I approached the place, I saw 3 motorcycles parked there. I turned off my phone. Then I turned it on again. Drea has left me 6 more messages since I left her this afternoon. They were pathetic. They started wondering why it was taking me so long to pack my things, and she ended up crying into the phone. The phone rang while I was listening to messages. Jack, that wasn't very nice, Drea said. Well, that allowed me to get out of the building without hitting anyone, I said. Jack, can we talk about this? She asked. I love you. I will do whatever you want to make it up to me. There's nothing you can do, Drea, I said. We're made. But Jack, it was just sex, she said. Drea, do you have any idea how stupid what you just said was? I asked. Of course, it was only sex. What the hell do you think it was? Ballet? Maybe nuclear fission? It was sex. You only had sex with a bunch of guys, one of whom was your brother. So, yeah, maybe it was just the sex, but that was the deciding factor for me. You didn't do anything illegal. You and I are not married yet, so you, as a U.S. citizen, Had every legal right to go out and have sex with as many guys as you wanted. No hard feelings. I'm not angry at you. It will work out better for everyone. If I had found out about this after we got married, it could have been costly. I have to admit that it hurts me a little because, Drea, I really have no idea how you feel about me, but I loved you. It was very painful. It's very painful, but I'll get through it. You can keep the furniture and everything I didn't take. I will not be back. I thought she had hung up and went back to checking my messages. There's a strange thing with phones. She never actually hung up on her end, and I had my phone on speaker since I was driving. As a result, I could hear her talking. She was talking to her brother. "It's as much your fault as it is mine," she snapped. "I've been a good girl for over 2 damn years. I only had a month or so left, and we would be heading to the gravy train. Why couldn't you go home and have sex with your wife? You had to come to take your little sister. Damn, Drea, you're sexier than her. Besides, you always said that I was the best. But you are still an easily accessible girl. I was just passing by with the guys. Stopped to take a bite while they waited below. It was you who said bring them all. Either way, you've always been a multi-partner bitch. And this isn't the first time you cheated on him. What about last month at the hotel? What about when he was out of town on business at that warehouse he works at, and you were harassed every night while he was away? Instead of pointing fingers at someone, you need to help me find a way out of this crap. But thinking isn't your strong suit, is it, little sister? He asked. That's why I had to find it for you in the first place. I was the one who told you that he got the money and everything, wasn't I? And look how easily he just made a fool out of you. He told you, okay, I forgive you, and you took your dumbass back upstairs, took off your clothes and waited for him. It took you almost an hour to realize that he wasn't coming. But you have to help me get him back, Gus, she whined. He has less than a month left before receiving the money. And guess what? I love him. He's the only guy I've been with who treats me so well. I shouldn't have had sex with you guys again. But you need to come up with something. Because if I'm not rich, then I won't be able to give you money. And damn, Gus, I'm 25. You know what will happen in a few years. If I'm anything like Mom and Molly, by the time I'm 30, my breasts will be on my knees and I'll be a ball. Then only the one who loves me will remain with me. So Jack will either love me or give me half his money. Think of something. Yes, I will order the guys to keep looking for him and we will bring him. Maybe we can just keep him here. We'll keep you two locked here together. We won't leave you anything else. Maybe he'll leave you. Then we will receive alimony. Alimony from a guy who has millions of dollars is more than enough for all of us. But Gus, I want my Jack back, she whined. Bitch, we can't always have what we want. If you really wanted him back, you should have kept your legs closed. You've probably had sex with at least 40 or 50 guys since you two got together. We're lucky you lasted this long. At least you were smart enough not to shit where you eat. If you had picked up someone at a bar, they would have caught you sooner. We'll just have to get everything we can out of him. I heard a door slam in the background and turned off my phone. So I thought, now I know. In some ways, it hurt even more. But knowledge really helped. I think all this time I thought Drea met me and fell in love with me but cheated on me for a while. I guess I thought maybe she was some kind of sex addict and just couldn't stop. Maybe with therapy or something she could be cured. But the situation was completely different than I thought. Drea and her brother intended to hook me from the very beginning. I think when all is said and done, it always comes back to money. Maybe, based on Drea's words, she liked me, or liked me a little. But the main concern here was, and always will be, money. So no matter how much my heart hurt, my brain took over. I did the right thing. I was better off without her. In a few weeks, I'll be able to buy all the blondes with short, fat asses I want. They have a factory near Vegas where they still make them to order. Since her brother and his biker buddies are looking for me, I should probably lay low for a while. I decided that the smartest thing for me to do would be to wait until tomorrow when the electrical system was back online, and then call them and tell them I would have to be out of town for a few weeks. I had a huge supply of vacation and sick leave, so there shouldn't be a problem. I'll take some time off, and after I get the money, I'll probably just move somewhere else to start over. There was really nothing keeping me here. I started to get distracted. The nap was nice until I realized I hadn't eaten since that morning, and it was almost 5 o'clock in the evening. I suddenly remembered my promise to the waitress and headed to my truck. I drove up to the cafe, keeping one eye on the road and the other on the lookout for bikers. I walked in and sat down at the same table as in the morning. She was nowhere to be found. I looked around and didn't see her anywhere. She then came out of the kitchen with a tray full of plates. She looked almost exhausted. Waitressing is hard work, and doing it for a 12-hour shift is no joke. As soon as her eyes noticed me, her face lit up. Her back straightened, and she added an extra twist of her hips. She placed a tray of plates on the table and rushed to my table before the other waitress even noticed I had entered. The customers at the other tables were confused. She just dropped an entire tray of plates on their table without removing the plates or giving them their orders. They didn't know whether she would return or not. The other waitress also glared at her. She didn't finish with one client and lashed out at another. She smiled at me and said she would be back in a second, and then went back to the first table. As my waitress quickly returned to her first table to hand out their plates and drinks. Another waitress, a taller, stockier blonde with a lot of makeup, approached. "Was Nadia expecting you this morning?" she asked. Her voice sounded like cigarettes and hard liquor. Her breath smelled like alcohol covered in mints. Underneath that smell was definitely the smell of a uniform that was washed only every other day. Her name tag said Flo, but it didn't seem to flow at all. She had the look of someone who had once gone with the flow and ended up stuck in the middle of the stream. Life passed her by, and now she hoped for a miracle. She reminded me of the old version of Drea. In her 20s, she was probably a very beautiful blonde with a very curvy figure and an hourglass figure. She probably had a big curvy ass, amazing breasts, and a twinkle in her blue eyes. She believed that she had everything she needed to make an easy life for herself. Therefore, instead of studying and making a career, she took the easy path. In terms of her life, she also chose the easy way. Instead of looking for long-term love with Mr. Right, she settled for quick fun with the Mr. Right Now series. So now that she was in her 40s, the sand in the hourglass had shifted. Her big curvy ass turned into another cellulite-riddled fat ass. If you looked closely, you could just make out the dimple in her cheap nylon uniform. Her twinkling blue eyes had lost their sparkle from too many parties, too much alcohol, and too many broken dreams. She suddenly realized that she had missed out on most of the things that make life special. For a woman who once could have had almost any man she looked at, and had, often more than one at a time, her personal hell was realizing that at this point in her life, she had none. Every night she went home calling her sister a bitch, because her less attractive sister lived in a beautiful duplex ranch house with her boring but loving husband and 3 children. Flo lived in a studio apartment on the 5th floor above the bowling alley. If something happened to her, no one would find her until the smell of cat shit became so bad that someone would have to investigate. I saw it all in the look she gave me when she asked me a question. Yes, she did," I said. "Did you actually tip her more than the bill?" she asked. "I guess," I said, shrugging. "So, what else did she give you? There was nothing strange about this, was there? Because look, I can do anything for you that she did, and I will do it better and cheaper, if you know what I mean," she said, looking around nervously. Before she could say anything else, my little brown-haired waitress came back and glared at her. I could almost swear I heard her growl under her breath. "Oh, hi, Nadia," Flo said. "I was just taking his orders so you wouldn't have to. I know you're busy at the table over there, and—" "You can take them," Nadia said. "But they are already eating. All you have to do is get a check from them, and of course, get a tip. It would be wrong. You did all the work," Flo said. "Mine," Nadia said, smiling at me. Flo shuffled over to another table. I heard her muttering to herself about evil bitches. Nadia stood over me and smiled. The change in her was amazing. In a matter of seconds, she stopped staring at her colleague and immediately smiled at me. When I looked at the menu, she seemed happy. The thought occurred to me that if she could, she would not only take my order, but also go to the kitchen and prepare it for me. "I'll have the grilled steak," I said. noticing that she wasn't writing it down. "No," she said sharply, looking at me and shaking her head. "Okay, then I'll have a grilled steak," I said. She said with the same slight trembling. "The meat is bad. It's expired," she whispered. Hamburger?" I asked questionably. I was rewarded with a smile and a nod. "I'd like fries with that and—" I paused when I noticed she shook her head again. "The grease hasn't been changed for several weeks. The fries smell like fish," she said under her breath. "Yes." "How about some soup?" I asked. "For now it's canned food, no homemade products," she said. "Can I have tomato soup with my hamburger?" I asked carefully. "Yes, sir," she said loudly. "One hamburger and tomato soup on the way." As Nadia went into the kitchen to hand over the order, Flo returned to my table. She watched the door to the kitchen. "Have you ever heard of an experience with a girl?" she asked. The door swung open, and she quickly turned back, pretending to just walk past me. When she saw that it was not Nadia, she returned, still keeping her eyes on the door. "You understand everything. We pretend to be married or dating. We go out, eat or watch a movie, and then you can take me home and spend the whole night with me. We can do whatever you want. I can even stay the night if you want. It costs more, but it's worth it," she said. "Is this worth your life, old witch?" Nadia crept up to us so quietly that neither Flo nor I heard her approach. She didn't leave the kitchen either. "He's not interested in yours," Nadia hissed. Flo left the place so quickly I thought she had a rocket up her ass. Nadia stood and looked intently at the other waitresses. She looked around the room furiously. It reminded me of those nature shows where some wild animal had its back against the wall, protecting its young from all comers. I wondered if these tips were that important. I think this morning proved that I am a good tipper, and Nadia made sure everyone knew that I was her customer. I knew deep down that there had to be something more behind this. A little later, she brought me food. She wore a tattered jacket over her cheap uniform. She looked like any other woman in her 20s. "I'm done for today," she said. "I hope you come back. If you didn't do this, I would miss you very much. I might even have to track you down." "Before you go, can I get the check?" I asked. She looked at me strangely. "You need to eat," she said. "You haven't eaten yet." "I'll pay for it first," I said. She went and brought the check. It must have been some kind of special dinner. The score was $4.99. I gave her 20 and 5. I thought Flo's eyes would pop out. "Are you giving me $5 for a tip again?" she asked. "You don't have to tip me." "Actually, the A was for the food," I said. 20 is your tip. You take very good care of me." Flo dropped the tray of dishes to the floor and stared at us. "I would like to," she said, biting her lip. "I would like to take care of you. You'll be back very soon, okay? But you eat now, you're too skinny. Remember what I said about tracking you down. And don't go with Flo." Over the next few days, I kept a very low profile. I moved to my new apartment. We bought new furniture and delivered it. I brought some things home in my truck and assembled them myself. I stayed home from work, but often drove there. Almost every time I walked by, I saw motorcycles either right in front of the building or further down the street. I also changed my mobile phone number. It didn't do me as much good as you think. Instead of being inundated with calls from Drea all day, I was inundated with calls from my friends, all wanting to tell me how upset Drea was and how poorly I was treating her. I even got a call from the HR director at my job. He met Drea at a company picnic and really thought he was helping me by relaying her calls to me. I think he thought that since we were engaged and everyone knew it, he was helping clear the path to marital bliss. I found myself in a situation where I had to tell 11 fucking people about how Drea cheated on me and explain to them why I couldn't get back with her. Most of my male friends were sure that I was losing a good thing. Some of them even suggested just keeping her around for sex and never marrying her. On the other hand, women were divided into two camps. The good ones thought that Dreams really loved me and that I should see this as a mistake and give her another chance. Really kind women all told me that Dream was an approachable girl and I was doing the right thing. All I knew was that, in 2 days, I would walk into a lawyer's office and walk out much richer. I was shopping and organizing my new apartment, met a few neighbors, and kept a low profile. The only time I left the building other than to shop was to go eat at a restaurant. I guessed it was risky to go there, but sometimes I needed to be around people. There was also the fact that I was starting to like Nadia. When I sat down and thought about it, I realized that there was a big difference between her and Drea. Drea always somehow made it clear to me that I could have sex with her anytime I wanted, but Nadia simply glowed when she saw me. Drea's reaction apparently extended to the other guys. They too could have sex with her whenever they wanted, as they wanted. I got the feeling that Nadia would be the woman who would be only mine and would expect me to be only hers. During the time that I went to the restaurant, the relationship between us slowly but surely developed. It got to the point that if I walked in, the waitresses all saw me and some nodded politely, but no one came to my table. Even if Nadia was taking a big order from another table with people, they would let me just sit there. I asked Flo about this one day, and she said to me across the table, "Remember 3 days ago when Sandy asked you if you wanted to order and you told her you did?" I nodded. It was a mistake. Sandy just let me order what I asked for, and it turned out to be not very good. I ordered something else, and Nadia was furious. She took the plate away from me without even letting me try it a second time to figure out what was wrong. She made me order something else. Well, Nadia slammed Sandy into the wall so hard that she cracked the plaster and still has back pain, Flo said. So no one here will come near you. But if you want to arrange something, she leaves at 6, and I work until 9. I noticed Flo was whispering, and even then she didn't slow down talking to me. Nadia soon came out of the kitchen and winked at me. She held up one finger, and I knew that meant she would be with me in a minute. As she approached my table, she ran her hands over my arms and shoulders. It was a gesture of introduction. Most men would think it was nice. Most women would understand that this meant she was claiming me. Tonight, Nadia was wearing tights under her uniform. I didn't pay any attention to it. She smiled when she saw me looking at her feet. "Do you like this color?" she asked. "No," I said. Her face fell. I noticed that every time I didn't like something about her, it was like a blow to her. "It's not that I don't like the color of your tights, Nadia," I said. Her smile returned when I said her name. I also noticed that she loves it when I say her name. "I just like looking at your bare legs better. I just like your legs. They're so... You want to mate with me, don't you?" She smiled. The smile she gave me must have been several megawatts brighter than usual. I've never heard anyone put it like that. There were women who asked if I wanted to be with them. There were women who asked if I wanted to make love to them or to them. Some more vulgar women asked if a guy wanted to have sex with them, and real bitches asked guys if they wanted to fuck them. But I have never heard a question formulated exactly like this. "You want it, don't you?" she asked. "Nadia, don't you think we could go on a date or something first?" I asked. "For what?" she asked. Her smile told me that the question was sincere. She didn't flirt or play any games. "Well, I really like you," I said. "So I'd like to know more about you. I don't want us to rush into anything and ruin the chance to be together for a long time." "Jack, we won't be together long," she said. This time it was me who was disappointed. "We will be together forever," she continued. "Or at least until we die. But you already know that," she smiled. "So we really need to go on a date," I said. She laughed. "Okay, if necessary," she sighed. "But not tonight. We'd better wait 36 hours. In fact, it's time for me to go." She looked around the room, made sure no one was watching us, and gave me a very quick kiss on the cheek. This made me wonder if she was crazy. It was the kind of kiss a teenage girl might give to her boyfriend. This was not what I expected from someone who had essentially asked me to have sex with me. As she held my hand before leaving, I noticed something about her that I had never noticed before. Her thin arms were very hairy. I've seen these same hands before, and apparently I just didn't notice the hair. They were very thick, almost like a light covering of fur. She kissed my cheek again, and I felt the hair on her cheek too. It wasn't noticeable, but what shocked me was the fact that I was sure that just a few moments ago, when she kissed me for the first time, this hair was not there. She released me reluctantly and began to walk away. I watched her thin hips sway away from me when I heard a voice. "Fuck it," he said roughly. He turned the chair opposite me backwards and sat down on it. "Drea is crying over you and you're making eyes at her. Her breasts aren't that big and she doesn't have an ass. Drea makes her look like a boy. What's wrong with you?" "I'm fine," I said. "I just prefer women that I don't have to share with a bunch of other men. I also prefer women that don't have sex with their brothers." "Well, yes, there is that," he laughed. "But you have to understand, Gus and Drea had difficult childhoods. When they were young, they often only had each other. It's a hard bond to break, and you know yourself that Drea loves sex, so does this have anything to do with me?" I asked. "So Drea loves you too," he said, as if that explained everything. "We already discussed this," I said. "Drea and I are done. I don't want anything to do with a bitch having sex with multiple partners, let alone being engaged to her. I paid my half for the rest of the lease. You can go to the apartment and have sex with Drea until the cows come home. I don't care anymore." "This won't happen anymore," he said. "Drea had to choose between you and what she did. She chose you. But she did it too late," I said. "We're done. Then you should come and tell her in person," he said. "Can you even be that polite?" I took out my phone and dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. I put the phone on speaker and let him hear her voice. "Drea, this is Jack," I said. "We had a good time, but we are too different. I don't want to marry you. When I caught you that night in our apartment, it broke my heart. I'm still trying to get over it. Maybe someday in the future. We can sit down and talk about it. I wish you all the best. I truly loved you, much more than you loved me." "But Jack," she stammered when I hung up. "How do you like it?" I asked. "I see you're going to be tough on this," he said. He stood up and left the restaurant the same way he entered. I assumed he knew he wasn't enough to take me anywhere. I remembered a plan Gus wanted to try from a conversation I overheard. I knew that Dream also knew that in a couple of days I would receive my money. So I decided to get out of there before he came back with enough guys to try and drag me somewhere. I quickly ran through the kitchen and out the back exit. It was the same exit through which Nadia had left less than 10 minutes ago. I ran outside and looked around in the alley behind the restaurant. It was dark, but the moon was in the sky and full. I knew, of course, that the full moon only lasted a few seconds, so it had not actually arrived yet. The moon appears full for about 36 hours to the naked eye, but again, the moon is technically full for only a few seconds. Something about it got me thinking, but I didn't connect it until later. As I was thinking about the moon and wondering how to get to my truck without being seen, they came out of the shadows. There were 3 of them. "We thought you might try to leave through the back door," one of them said, "but it wouldn't matter." He took out his phone and dialed a number. "He went this way," he said. Even after he hung up, he smiled at me. "We're all going to visit friends," he smiled. "We're all not going anywhere," I said, also smiling. "I'm not going anywhere with you, and we don't have mutual friends." "Oh, don't be like that," he said. "Your fiancé loves you. It's all a big misunderstanding." When he said bride, something strange happened. I swear I heard a growl coming from the trash cans behind the restaurant. One of the 3 looked back. I think he heard it too. 3 other guys came around the corner, and I found myself surrounded by 6 bikers in a tight semicircle. The door back to the restaurant was closed, and I stood with my back to the wall. Okay, this isn't the first time I've gotten my ass kicked, and it probably won't be the last. I'll probably lose, but I'll fall fighting, and at least one of you cowards will fall with me, I said. "What are you talking about, Jack?" asked the guy who entered the restaurant. "We don't want to hurt you. We don't want to fight, and we don't need to fight. We're just going to take you to Dream. You two will spend a few days together, and when things get better, you can get married." I was sure I heard the growl again. Whatever it wasn't a little lost dog. "We really hoped you would come with us willingly. But if we have to drag you to dream, screaming and struggling, we will," he said. At that moment, real chaos broke out. I grabbed the lid from one of the trash cans next to me. Holding it by the edge, I swung powerfully and it hit the guy closest to me on the head. The impact was so strong that the lid bent, and the guy fell. He wasn't unconscious, but he was dazed. I hit the next guy next to him in the groin, and he fell. "I was hoping we wouldn't have to do this," the first guy said again. Two of them grabbed my hands while the third one hit me in the face. I spat blood into the face of the guy who hit me. "To hell with you," I muttered. "If I survive this, I'll make sure none of you are left alive. Once I get my money, you're all dead. And if I don't survive, there won't be any money, so Drea and Gus will kill you anyway." The next thing I knew, I heard the growl again, but it was angrier and much closer. As the men struggled to pull me out of the alley, a large, shadowy figure knocked one of them to the ground. I briefly saw huge jaws clamp around the neck of one of the men. He screamed, and then whatever it was that did it disappeared. I heard another growl and saw the flash of a huge, clawed hand piercing the other guy's face. The two men holding my hands looked around in horror. I took this moment to attack again. The two men holding my hands were just as shocked as I was. I pulled my hand away and hit one of them on the bridge of his nose. He stepped back and saw a huge, furry creature crash into the man holding my other hand. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. He then took off running, leaving his friends behind. The creature that attacked us caused one man to cower in a corner. I also turned to run away. The last man looked at me and said, "You're not going anywhere, buddy." As soon as he said this, the creature abandoned the man it had cornered and headed towards him. He tried to run away, but the creature immobilized him in one fell swoop. His cruel claws tore the muscles on his back so hard that he fell and did not move again. The creature turned to me. It was taller than me and more massive. Huge teeth protruded from its furry muzzle. I would have thought it was a huge, distorted dog if it hadn't stood up on two legs. I had no weapon, and my only possible ally was the last remaining biker, who was still cowering in the corner, too scared to move. The creature took a breath and paused, looking at me. I saw a trembling run through his entire body, and then his huge head turned in my direction. The surprising thing about this was that his eyes were not what I expected. They were not wild or bestial. They were almost human. In fact, I was sure I had seen eyes like these somewhere before. In my shocked state, however, I couldn't remember where. The creature took another breath of air and then jumped away into the darkness. For a long time, I just stood there in shock. Then he turned and started walking towards his truck. "Hey, wait," said the guy in the corner. I turned around to look at him. "Aren't you going to do something?" he asked. "Such as?" I asked. "Like calling 911 or checking the bodies to see who's dead and who might need help?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm going home." "But you have to," he said. "No, you shouldn't," I answered sharply. "You idiots tried to kidnap me. Just when I decided I wasn't going to go along with it, you started attacking me. Whatever happens to you, happens. I don't care if they live or die." "You don't understand," he said. "We have nothing against you. We just did what Gus told us to do. It was all in an attempt to get you and Drea back together. Drea loves you, fool. We're the good guys." "No," I said. "You guys are stupid. Drea and Gus wanted me to marry Drea because I was about to inherit a lot of money. If I were married to Drea or she had my baby, they expected to be in a big way. Even if we got divorced, she would have gotten some money so she wouldn't have to look for a job. Gus brought you all together to do his dirty work and didn't give you all the facts or even tell you about the money, did he?" "No," said the guy. "He just said there was a misunderstanding between you and his sister. He showed us a bunch of pictures of you together, and Drea was sitting there crying about how you always made her feel special. She told us that she loved you and that she won't be the same without you. Gus told us that you saw him kiss her and didn't realize it was just a brotherly kiss, congratulating her on her engagement to you. He thought we could bring you in and explain the situation, and everything will work out. After all, he was counting on you to thank us for saving your relationship. So you all weren't there when I caught her? I laughed. When did you catch her? He asked. I caught Drea having sex with her own brother and probably a bunch of other guys who were waiting their turn, I said. I'm not going to marry a woman who needs to have sex with someone other than me. I understand, he said. If my woman did that, I wouldn't run away from her. I would beat her and whoever was with her. I guess I love Drea too much for that, I said. Plus, I'm just not the type of man who would ever hit a woman. So, why didn't you tell us about this right away? He asked. I tried, I said. I kept telling that guy that I had nothing to say to Drea. I told him that everything between us was over and done with. He didn't listen. Well, you probably shouldn't have let that dog out on us anyway. It was the biggest, scariest dog I've ever seen. How did you train like that? He asked. What? I asked. I've never seen this creature before, and I don't think it was a dog. What do you mean? He asked. This thing appeared when we started trying to convince you to come with us. It bit or hurt everyone it saw until it stopped in front of you. I thought you were dead, but it just looked at you, then calmed down and left. What is this, if not a dog? How many dogs have you seen walking on two legs? I asked. Well, at the circus they do it all the time, he said. Yeah, this is the circus. Since you think that I know this creature, I am the director of the circus, and you and your friends are clowns. I have to go, I said. I walked back to my truck. I kept looking over my shoulder because I was sure someone was watching me. I turned in all directions several times but didn't see anyone. I opened the truck and started the engine. Just as I was about to put it in gear, a tapping sound on the window scared the living daylights out of me. I turned around and saw the biker I had just spoken to. I rolled down the window and looked at him. I have no way of getting home, he said. I want to get out of here as soon as possible. Can you, Sit in the back, I said. I'll drop you off at Drea's. You can call a taxi from there. He climbed into the back seat of the truck and grabbed onto it. I drove him to the apartment I shared with Drea. When I was a few blocks away from her, I asked for his number. I used his phone to call Drea because I didn't want her to know my new number. As soon as she said hello, I started talking. I'm planting one of your bastards in front of the toilet you've turned our house into, I said sarcastically. You and Gus need to start taking better care of your toys. At this rate, you'll soon lose them. Jack, fuck him, she said. Fuck all of them. Fuck Gus, too. None of them are important. All I need is you. Drea, haven't you already done this? I asked. Did what, dear? She asked sweetly. Slept with him, slept with Hassam, slept with all of them, I said. You slept with me too, but that's over. Jack, you know I'm a little crazy. I just thought it was all for fun. You were the only one that mattered. The others were just... Look, I was doing this before I met you. When we first met, you knew I wasn't an angel. But you still treated me like one, Jack. I guess I thought that if you didn't find out, no one would get hurt. I grew up knowing that I don't care. I had to fight for everything I had and always have a backup plan in case something went wrong. It's just survival, honey. When I met you, it didn't matter whether it was part of my brother's plan or not. Okay, maybe it was in the beginning, but damn, Jack, I fell in love with you. Over time, I loved you so much that nothing else mattered anymore. When you drop off whoever you brought, you can just pick me up. You and I will go somewhere together. We will go somewhere where no one knows us and start all over again. I will sign a paper saying that if we ever get divorced or separated, I will not be entitled to a penny of your money and all of our children will remain with you. I promise that I will never let another man touch me before the end of my days. I must admit, the offer was tempting, especially considering that I really loved her, but I just couldn't trust her anymore. I didn't even trust her enough to leave her. So I just stopped the truck in front of her building long enough for the guy in the back to get out and drove home. I fell asleep as soon as I touched the pillow and slept soundly all night. If I had any dreams, I don't remember them. Sometime early in the morning, however, I woke up and lay in bed, thinking about everything. I thought about Dre. She was beautiful, but I was no longer in love with her. My heart belonged more and more to Nadia. I was sure that if she had let her hair grow a little longer, she would have been no less attractive than Drea, and her beauty would have lasted much longer. That's when I put everything together. That's when I understood everything. I began to think about how beautiful Nadia's big gray eyes were, and then I realized that they were the same eyes as those of that dog creature. I sat up in bed, sweating. Then he laughed loudly. I must be going crazy, I thought. This is the real world. What was I thinking? Nadia is some kind of dog girl? Oh God, my girlfriend is a werewolf. I got up and decided to go to the restaurant for breakfast. I looked around and didn't see her. Another waitress came up to me and asked what I should get. She was sweet in her curvaceous, mommy style. "Where is Nadia?" I asked. "Oh, she doesn't come so early unless someone else comes out," she said. "And she took the day off today too. So what can I get you?" "Nadia's phone number," I said. "Let me guess," she grinned. "You're Jack, aren't you?" I nodded. "I shouldn't have been surprised," she said. "Everyone here has been talking about Jack and Nadia for the last few weeks. Did you know that she hurt one of the other waitresses serving you?" I told her I heard about it. "This girl has been working here for almost a year. She's one of the few people here besides me who doesn't sleep with clients, and then you show up and she goes crazy. So, what's the matter? What do you have that gets her so excited? Give me a guess. I heard you talk, so you don't have a particularly rollicking tongue. You dress like you work in the warehouse over there, so you're not rich. So you must be at least a foot long and thick like a can of beer, right?" she asked. "Nadia has never been with a man, so once you first turned her on, she just became dependent on you, right?" she asked. I think it's more the other way around," I said. "We've never had sex. In fact, when she brought it up, I told her that I'd rather we go on a date first to get to know each other better. In fact, we've never seen each other outside of that restaurant, and you'll notice that all you ever heard of was me coming here day after day. Do you really think I come here for food?" She looked at me, and her expression changed. Then she sighed. "I'm saved," she said. "From what?" I asked. "The possibility of getting into trouble," she said. "I believed you. I looked at you and really thought that you were a good guy and that you cared about Nadia. I was going to give you her phone number, but..." "But what?" I asked. "But since she's behind you, I won't have to do that," she said. She turned and walked to another table. Nadia looked at me cautiously. I smiled at her and looked at her. Today she was wearing pantyhose again. She also wore a long-sleeved t-shirt, so I couldn't see if she still had hair on her arms. The light covering of hair on her cheeks was still visible. "I'm not working today, Jack," she said. "I should have told you." "Yeah, we could spend all day together on our date," I said. "Oh no," she said. "Why not?" I asked. "This is my period, Jack," she said. "My hormones are going crazy. I'm getting bloated, and I'm even getting hairier. I'm irritable and moody. I just don't want to put you through that yet." "Well, that's okay," I said. "I also have something important to do today." "Jack, I really want you. Tomorrow night for sure," she said. "Nadia, I'm not in a hurry," I told her. "I'm in a hurry, Jack," she said. "This will be my first time." "Honey, we can wait. I want to get to know you better," I said. "What is there to meet?" she asked. "I am a woman, you are a man. We are perfect for each other. We will be together until the end of our days." I was shocked. "What about love, respect, and compatibility?" I asked. "What about our plans for the future?" I asked. "What about music, food, and raising children?" "I like the music you like," she said. "I will eat whatever you want, and I will happily bear your children." For a moment, I was sure Nadia was going to say something else. Did she mean to say that she would give birth to my sweet babies or something else? "But how do you know we're right for each other?" I asked. "We are connected," she said. "Here." She touched my forehead and then hers. "And here." She touched her chest and then mine. After this, 2 police officers approached our table. "We'd like to ask you a couple of questions," one of the officers said. 4 bodies were found behind this restaurant last night. 2 of them are dead, another will never walk, and the last one is in a coma." Nadia was calm as a cucumber. "I didn't see anything," she said, shaking her head. The way she said it reminded me of an old TV show. The show was called Hogan's Heroes. She reminded me of one of the German guards in the prison camp, Sergeant Schultz. "I don't know anything at all," she continued. "Well, it probably happened after you went home," the policeman said. "And you, sir?" "Well, we, left at about the same time and ended up in about the same place," I said. It was a soft lie. "Oh, I see," said the policeman. By his tone, he assumed that Nadia and I had gone somewhere together to have sex. "Well, we didn't think either of you did anything," the policeman said. "We were just wondering if you saw anything. I'm pretty sure I know what happened. I've seen it before. In fact, I'm probably an expert on it." "So what happened?" I asked. "These guys are bikers. They're usually always fighting and using substances, so no one will really cry because a couple of them were killed. Society as a whole will only be better and smarter without their IQs lowering the average intelligence level. That guy who can talk is always talking about giant dogs that attacked him and his friends, but left you alone." "Giant dogs?" I said. "Remember, we're talking about a bunch of bikers using substances," he said. "Both survivors had all sorts of substances found in the system. We are near the forest, and last night there was a full moon. There will also be a full moon tonight. There could be a wolf or a bear that smelled the restaurant's garbage and simply wandered here. Our bikers were not in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm sure none of the people they harassed or offended will worry about them. Thank you for your time," he said. As the police approached the counter to ask another waitress questions about the previous evening, Nadia and I began talking again. She reached across the table to take mine, and an uncontrollable trembling took over her body. "I really want you," she said. "Tomorrow night, for sure." "Can we at least meet here and have dinner tonight?" I asked. "It has to be before dark," she said. "Why?" I asked. "It's just the way it is," she said. "See you then," I said. As I stood up, I leaned over and kissed her lightly on the cheek. I looked at my watch and realized that I barely had enough time to shower and change before meeting with my grandfather's lawyer. I returned home and took a shower. I tried to look my best. Somehow I didn't think at all about the men who had been wounded or killed in the alley the night before. I completely pushed them out of my thoughts. I guess it was because I didn't kill anyone personally, and because they deserved their fate. Also, after a few moments, the game will end. I'll walk into the office, talk to the lawyer, and walk out with a rich man. I have already changed my place of residence and lifestyle. I've also gotten over my breakup with Drea. Whatever happened to those guys was their fault, or Drea's and her brother's. None of this concerned me. I put on a suit for the first time in a long time and met with the lawyer in his office. I even managed to wait for him at the reception. "Oh my God," he said. "You'll have to get used to not having to do things like that anymore," he said. "Now you have the money to tell anyone to fuck you," he said. I looked at him strangely. "It means you don't have to put up with any trouble from anyone," he continued. "You have enough money to tell anyone you don't like to screw you. You can say it out loud and not worry about the consequences," he continued. "Life is like a shit sandwich. The more bread you have, the less shit you have to eat. And now you have a lot of bread. You'll never have to worry about getting up for work again unless you want to," he said. "I actually don't mind going to work," I said. He looked at me strangely. "Isn't it disgusting?" he asked. "No, I don't mind going to work," I said. "But this 8-hour wait before going home is complete nonsense." We both laughed at this. I signed some documents and gave him my bank account details. All funds and securities from my grandfather's estate were transferred to me, including a large amount of cash and some very liquid securities. I breathed a sigh of relief. I've been jumping through hoops for years, but the money is finally mine. I still didn't feel any different. Yesterday I was a night manager at a warehouse. I was a college graduate, but I was the youngest at my job, so I got the crappiest shift. Today, I am independently wealthy. I guess it hasn't sunk in yet. I returned home to think about what to do next. I was smart enough not to make any big moves or changes right away. I wasn't going to treat it like I'd won the lottery and start doing really stupid things. I must have really been caught up in my thoughts because when I drove home, I didn't even notice anything. I was sitting in the kitchen trying to decide if I even wanted to stay and do the 3-month trial lease or just buy a nice house when my cell phone rang. I answered without looking at the screen. "Jack, remember when you called me the other day and used Jerry's phone so I couldn't call you back?" she asked. It was Drea. "Well, you must have forgotten. But when you called me while you were talking to Spike, you were using your own phone. And it's a good thing you did, because if you hadn't made that little mistake, I wouldn't have been able to call you. I prefer to think that you did this on purpose, because deep down you are not yet ready to give up on us." "What do you want, Andrea?" I asked. "Oh, Andrea, huh?" she asked. "You never call me that, honey. You gave me my name. This is Drea. Andrea is the approachable girl. Drea is the one who loves you. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you that my brother is very angry at you. You hurt a lot of his friends, and the police started investigating their club to find out where they got their stuff from. Gus was so angry that he set your truck on fire." I threw the phone and ran out to the window. Looking down into the parking lot of the building, I saw that my truck was actually on fire. I ran out of the apartment and into the parking lot. I tried running a hose from the wall that the gardeners used to water the plants to the truck. I pulled him close enough, and as soon as I started to put out the truck, the light went out. They set me up like a sucker. I was still half asleep when I came to, tied to a chair in my apartment. Gus sat in front of me smiling. "Not as smart as I thought, huh?" he said. "Get your dirty feet off my damn couch," I snapped. He took off his legs and looked at me. "There is no reason for us to be hostile to each other, brother-in-law," he said. "Listen, we've both said and done terrible things that we regret. The main thing I want to do is get us back together so we can be a family. In fact, I could disappear from your life forever in half an hour or so," he said. "You better take all your friends and get out of my life right now," I said. "It will be even faster and even better." Jack, he said. "You're not seeing the big picture. I'm the only thing standing between you and the long arm of the law. All that money won't do you any good if your ass rots in prison." "What are you talking about?" I asked. I looked at my watch. "How long have I been unconscious? It's getting dark. Damn, you bastards made me miss dinner with Nadia." "Is this the skinny girl you replaced my sister with?" he asked. "I really love skinny ones. I love the way they start screaming when you get them. But we have things to do. And in a way, it's good that you didn't meet her. You belong to Drea. Look how her breasts bulge out of this t-shirt. If I weren't her brother and wasn't already married, I would take it myself." "Gus, you already did it. That's what caused our breakup," I snapped. "It doesn't count. I was drunk," he said. "And she was drunk too. But she's going to stop drinking, and I'm sure you'll be moving somewhere soon, so let's just forget about it and make sure we don't end up in jail." "I'm not in danger of going to jail," I said. "Think about it carefully, brother-in-law," he said. "Remember the night you left my sister? You broke a man's jaw with his own damn helmet. It was fucking incredible, I tell you. Even as drunk as I was, I knew you were something special. You're not the best. Big guy, I know, and not the strongest. But you somehow managed to stop time. He lunged at you. I was going to try to scream at him not to touch you because you're Drea's future husband, but I couldn't get my mouth to work. I guess it was because I was so damn drunk." He shrugged and smiled. "But even as he was flying towards you, you picked up that helmet and swung it faster than anything I remember. The helmet was just a blur. And that crack when it hit his jaw. This guy he is fed through a tube. They say he will never be able to move his jaw enough to speak properly. He may also never have enough strength in his jaw to chew solid food. We told the cops and had him write to them that he just got drunk and fell down the steps and hit his jaw. I don't think they believed it, but since they had no other theory, they had to go with it. And then there was that night. I lost it. 4 guys. 2 of them are dead. One is still in a coma, and the last one has gone crazy. Then there is Jerry. Since that night in the alley, this guy has been afraid of the dark. He even sleeps with the light on, talking about giant dogs attacking them, but leaves you alone. I'm guessing you bought some rare breed of attack dog, or maybe even a trained bear, and unleashed it on my boys. That would give you 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of heavy assault. He smiled. But if we can work this out as a family, you can go your way and I can go mine, he said. Go to hell, I said. Listen, I only ask you 2 things, he said. One thing is for me, and the other is for my sister. But she seems to have changed her mind. I want you to give me some money. With my connections, I can use this seed money to buy enough products and become rich myself. Who knows? In a few years, I may have to lend you some money. How much is so little? I asked. $500,000, he replied. And I was going to say that you should pay Andrea a similar amount for her emotional damages, but for some reason this stupid girl wants to come back to you. She even wants to sign a paper saying that you don't have to pay her anything and nothing to her. Don't give up. She really loves you. In exchange for you taking her back, she will never tell the police that you killed and maimed our friends. So, you see, son-in-law, for less than 20% of your money, you get everything. You get rid of me and get the girl too. And if you two moved somewhere and started over, you wouldn't even have to worry about me sleeping with her. At that moment, I had the strangest feeling. I couldn't quite put it into words, but I knew what was about to happen. What do you say to that? He smiled. Do we have a deal? What about my truck? I asked, trying to gain time. Damn, Jack, you're a millionaire. Buy another one, he said. You killed and mutilated 5 human beings. Forget about that old truck. The feeling in my head was now unsettling. I smiled. What are you thinking about? He asked. Do we have a deal? Drea came up to me and started rubbing her big breasts against my hand. Drea, in my own way, I truly believe that you love me. So I'm going to save your life. Take off your clothes now. Take them into the shower with you. You need to wash every trace of my scent from you and your clothes. If you don't do this, you'll die. She looked at me like I was crazy, but ran to the bathroom, shedding her clothes along the way. God, that bitch is stupid, Gus snorted. She loves you so much that she just does whatever you tell her. That's why I had to take care of her whole life. She's just too damn stupid to live. God gave her this incredible body and not enough brains to... Gus was interrupted by the sound of a heavy door breaking into pieces. Even with the lights on, it was scary. In less than a second, both men in front of the door began screaming as something from the hallway reached into the well-lit room and pulled them out. The other 2 men with Gus retreated deeper into the room. Damn, what is this? Asked Gus. He became very pale. I heard Drea turn on the water in the shower. And then it happened. From hell, a creature slowly entered the room. There was no point in arguing with those big gray eyes. It threw its head back and howled. One of the men with Gus peed himself right then. Gus turned to me in panic. Jack, I was just kidding, he said. Cancel it. It grabbed my brand new flat-screen TV off the wall and threw it across the room like it weighed less than a pound. The TV hit one of the men. The creature growled and turned to the second one. He looked at him and then ran to the window and jumped. We were on the 3rd floor, but apparently he decided it was better to leave. Gus turned to me. Please, Jack, he moaned. Gus was close enough to me that I could reach him. My hands were still tied behind the chair, but my legs were free. I hit him in the groin as hard as I could. He was still clutching his groin in shock when the creature attacked him. Gus fell to the floor in front of me. He died. The creature sniffed the air around me and turned sharply. I realized that it was heading to the bathroom. I made a big mistake. Smell transmission obviously works both ways. Damn, how was I supposed to know that? I was smart in that I told Drea to wash every trace of me from her body and clothes. Unfortunately, when she rubbed her huge breasts against me, she left some of her scent on me, and the creature was furious. It moved towards the bathroom and slammed its huge fist into the door, which nearly flew out of its hinges. Drea's scream pierced the night. "Nadia, no!" I shouted. "She means nothing to me. She's one of them. We'll let her take all the blame for this." She looked at me and knocked loudly on the door again. In the distance, I heard a police siren. Several sirens, actually. "Nadia, go away," I said. "I'll meet you in the morning." She turned to me and looked. It was as if she was trying to figure out if she had heard me correctly. "Remember what you told me," I said. "We're a couple until we die. Now go away." She jumped out of the room. I don't know where she went, but it definitely wasn't down the stairs because as soon as she left, I heard the sounds of the police coming up the stairs. 3 of them entered my apartment, guns drawn, just seconds after she left. They looked around the room, peering into every crevice. I threw my head back as if I was unconscious. Suddenly there was a sound. It came from the bathroom. All the cops turned in that direction. "Who's there?" one of the policemen shouted. "Come out with your hands up." Drea slowly opened the door and walked out into the room even more slowly, wrapping herself in only a towel. "I need to hold on to the towel, otherwise it will fall," she smiled. "We don't want that, right?" One of the cops even smiled. "No, ma'am," he chuckled, although it was obvious what he wanted. Drea worked her charm. I was pretty sure that if I gave her enough time, she would seduce the cops into sex. They'll all screw her and probably let her go. Not that I cared, but it was time to wake up. "Oh," I moaned. I looked around the room. "It's good that you caught her," I said. "Where are the others?" The cops suddenly snapped out of their daze and looked at me instead of Drea. "What's happening?" they asked. "Who are you?" "My name is Jack Silver. I live in this apartment. This woman—" "I'm his fiancé," Drea said. "She's my ex-fiancé," I said. "We're not going to get married." "We're just having a fight," she said. "But we'll get through this. I love him. She loves me so much that she and her brother and his biker friends tried to extort money from me," I said. "We didn't. At least I didn't try to," she added. "It's not what you think." "Sir, what happened to all these guys?" asked one of the cops. "Officer, after I told them I wouldn't give them money, one of them hit me in the back of the head with something," I said. "I've been unconscious since then." "You are lying," she screamed. "Officer, check that one's ID. It's her brother. Check my head. I have a lump the size of a baseball from the way it's throbbing. I'm sure if you look around the room, you'll find what they hit me with. In fact, there is a better way. Check my phone's call log. You will see that the last call I received was from her. I recorded the conversation. She called me to tell me that my truck was on fire. They did this to lure me into the parking lot. If you check the CCTV footage in the parking lot, you'll probably see them hit me in the head. Then you'll be able to ask her the real questions because you'll know who's lying." The first cop examined my head. He immediately called an ambulance. "He's not kidding, Grant," he said. "Someone got hit hard. Check that parking lot." "Okay," Drea shouted. "He's telling the truth. But I wasn't trying to get money from him. My brother wanted it, but I just wanted him back. I really love him. I would do anything to get him back. I just went with them to maybe make sure that they wouldn't hurt him. I had no idea that he would summon his giant beast to kill them all." I looked at her like she was crazy. "My what?" I asked. "Drea, what did Gus want to spend my money on?" I asked. "He was going to buy $500,000 worth of illegal substances. He would have gotten 2 to 3 times that much on the street," she said. "Drea, have you ever used Gus's substances?" I asked her. "Well, just to relax," she answered sharply. "And our breakup was stressful for both of us, wasn't it? I asked. "Only a little," she replied sharply. "I'm not high." "Then why? While your brother and all his friends were being torn apart by my giant dog beast, were you showering in the apartment of a man you're no longer dating?" I asked. "Because you told me," she replied sharply. "Yes, of course," I said. Even the officers began to look at her strangely. "Mr. Silver, do you have any idea what happened here?" asked one of the cops. "Not at all," I said. They hit me over the head when I said I wouldn't give them money, and when I woke up, you were already here. I didn't tell that crap to shower at my house. I just spent a ton of money moving here to get rid of her. I even paid the last month's rent on my old apartment so I could legally move out of there. There is no way I would want her here, let alone her naked in my shower. And last time I checked, I didn't have a giant dog beast. I'd check her for traces of substances if I were you. By that time, the ambulance had already arrived and they examined my head. They also finally released me. I stood up and took a long step, as if I could barely stand. They took me to the hospital. I was examined and told that I would probably need to stay overnight for observation. I called my lawyer, and he was able to explain to them that I had recently received a large amount of money. They also checked my work and found out that I had recently broken up with Drea, and she had basically been stalking me ever since. The manager of my old house also told them about the parties Drea was throwing with the bikers, and how when I came home from work I immediately moved out. When the cops put it all together, they decided to charge Drea with accessory to all crimes, including assault, kidnapping, and extortion. Her brother and his biker friends had made enemies among several rival clubs and gangs, and police decided that one of these gangs was likely training large breed attack dogs and using them against the gang. Since the same thing had happened in the alley behind the restaurant some time ago, they now had an idea, or at least a theory, about what happened in both cases. They thought the bikers were following me from the restaurant and ran into another gang. Then, when they tried to extort money from me, another gang used this time to destroy them. I was lucky that I was unconscious, otherwise they could have turned the dogs on me too. I testified, and the police were done with me. I told them that since I inherited the money, I had had too many incidents and I was going to move to another area where it might be safer for me. They understood. I was released the next morning. First of all, I headed to the restaurant. Nadia was already there. She was taking a tray out of the kitchen and dropped it. The sound of breaking dishes echoed throughout the restaurant. She looked at me and covered her mouth with her hands. Her face was sad. I beckoned her with my finger, and she slowly approached me. I hugged her, and she cuddled up to me. "Is this a goodbye hug?" she asked. "Because you really don't have to—" I shut her up by placing my finger on her lips. "Yes. This is a goodbye hug," I said. Her face fell. "Say goodbye to all these people," I said. "You and I are leaving. We're moving to a better place." She hugged me as if her life depended on it. "But what about—" she began. "We'll figure it out," I finished. "We'll buy an area with a lot of wood and game." I kissed her on the cheek and noticed that there was no hair. I touched it. Her cheeks were smooth, like a baby's. "The full moon has passed," she said. "No wool until next time." And that's what we did. We bought a large property in California, over 100 acres of woods. We lived, loved, and were happy. There were a lot of deer on our territory. There were many small animals and even a few wolves. Over the next 2 years, it seemed as if wolves from all over the region came to live on our territory. I guess I believed that this would bring some form of security because if Nadia ever got out of control or made a mistake, no matter what happened, it could always be blamed on one of them. Nadia and I were madly in love. We were together every second of every day, except for the nights during the 36 hours of every month when the moon was full. Nadia was the sweetest, happiest woman I have ever been with. She liked to take care of me, and I liked to take care of her in return. Our sex life was fantastic. We just never got enough of each other. She threw herself at me at every opportunity. Pardon the pun, like a bitch in heat. I loved having those thin, muscular legs wrapped around my waist, and she just begged me to take her harder. It was exactly like in our common daytime dream. We enjoyed being together and shared our interests with each other. She loved watching me wash or work on my silver '09 Mustang GT. The car was equipped with everything possible. It had the largest supercharger available. I took the engine apart and replaced everything with stronger forged parts. The car produced over 600 horsepower, and it was difficult to keep the tires on it. On the other hand, Nadia just loved taking me deep into the forest and showing me things no one had ever seen before. She never got lost. When I mentioned it one day, she just smiled as if I had said something funny. How will we find our way home? I asked. We're already home, silly, she said. We own everything you see, but the house is over there. Like I said, the only times we were truly apart were nights during the full moon. Sometimes it was one night, sometimes two, but never more, and even then, only at night. As soon as the sun rose, she would find her way back to me. Sometimes she returned covered in dirt, grass, and earth. But I always greeted her the same way, with a big hug and a long shower. She was always a little irritable right before her transformation, and of course the hair, or fur, gave it away. But she was usually the happiest thing on the planet once it was over. Nadia, like all of us, had her shortcomings. It was very dangerous to make friends. The men were fine. She never showed even the slightest interest in any man other than me. There were times when we met or came across guys like the handsome main characters. After what happened with Drea, I always kept a close eye on her. There were even a few instances where guys complimented her. She just laughed at them and told them that she already had a companion. The worst was when a local politician wouldn't take no for an answer. He touched her where he shouldn't have and ended up on the ground. He was surprised that my fragile woman knocked him down so easily. The problem with friendship was that Nadia was very territorial. Wolves choose a mate for life, and a large part of her being was a wolf. It didn't have to be an attractive woman for Nadia's fur to stand up and aggressive intentions to appear. When a 68-year-old supermarket cashier told me I was cute, Nadia had to be restrained. Not a single woman, teenager, or girl, regardless of age or beauty, could approach me without Nadia baring her teeth and showing aggression. However, we didn't have to worry about Drea's presence. She admitted her guilt and made a deal. She served a 10-year sentence. I guess my relationship history is not very good, so I'm always on guard. Nadia is doing everything she can to convince me that we are forever, but it will take time. I still find it hard to believe that this goddess woman loves me, but everything she does proves it. Yesterday, we had a picnic deep in the forest on our property. Since there are never strangers on our territory without our knowledge, Nadia took off her clothes and lay down next to me to take a nap. I looked at her as usual. Since she let her hair grow, she has become even more beautiful than when we met. She also gained some weight by eating with me and not just when she was hungry. I liked looking at both the curves of her body and her facial features. Sometimes she watched me through narrowed eyes, and I never knew she was looking at me until she laughed or gave herself away otherwise. "What are you looking at, Jack?" she asked. "To the most beautiful creature," I said. "Well, if you like my body so much, maybe you should use it." She smiled, and I did so. In any case, we live one day at a time, and this morning, Nadia came to me and looked very worried. "Jack," she said, "we have a problem." "What happened, Nadia?" I asked. "I'm pretty sure we're pregnant," she said. "Nadia, it's not a problem," I told her. "It's a blessing. I love you, and I will love our baby, too." "And if he is," she began. She hesitated. "Like me? Then I'll have two people to love that I have to worry about for 36 hours every month instead of just one. Whatever happens, we'll get through it." "I'm sure we can handle it. When two people love each other as much as we do, it's hard for anything to undermine us." Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.